Good morning. My name is Arne Mertz. I work at Züge and I've been blogging about C++ and more non-technical stuff like clean code, testing and the like for close to 3 years now. So when I submitted a more technical talk about C++, Jens asked me, couldn't you do something about code reviews? So here we go. Let's see a show of hands. Who of you is doing code reviews? Oh, that's quite a lot. Great. So what are you doing here? Who of you is thinking that code reviews do not quite provide the value that you invest in time into the code reviews? A few, okay. So let's see what we could do about that. First question is because why should we do code reviews? Why are we doing code reviews? I sometimes hear people saying like, well, because everyone does it, we do it too. When I was a little kid, I tried to get by with this with my parents. Everyone does it, I have to do it too. No, you don't have to do things because everyone does them. You need to have a reason. So other people say, well, some guru says we should do code reviews. It's in this and that book, we should do code reviews. That's not the reason either. Some say it's agile, so we have to do code reviews. If you do something just because it's agile, that's not very agile. You should have real reasons. You should reflect why you are doing these things and then improve them or drop them if you don't need them, if you think. The most important thing about basically everything we do is, well, we want to do software to make money with it, right? And investing time into something is investing money. So we should better get real good values out of our code reviews, or else we're just wasting money to getting not enough back. So one of the main reasons we hear for doing code reviews is QA. Who has read Steve McConnell's Code Complete? That's way too little hands. Those who haven't, you should read it. It's a rather old book. It's like 93 or 94 or something like that. But it's still a good book, it's a classic. And he also writes that code reviews are a quality gate, just like testing, like the real QA is. The earlier you catch your problems, your bugs, your bad code, the less it will cost you. If you have to like ship it to your customers to see your problems at the customer and get the things back, it will cost you way more than if you just see it right after you have written the code. So code reviews is one of the earliest quality gates we can have. So one of the reasons we do QA, we can do code reviews is catching bugs. But we also have tests for catching bugs. So I don't know, in the 60s they started things like formalized code reviews, code inspections, where if you do like larger features, then you would have the programmer, one reviewer and one moderator sitting together and going through the code line by line. And they had studies back then that showed that this kind of reviewing the code could decrease your bugs in the code like 20 to 30%. And then they did similar, less formal things for smaller commits, for smaller changes. And they also had like pretty good chances to reduce your bugs. They found like typos and other things, off by one errors, all the classical stuff we tend to oversee. And these also reduced like 20, 30, 40% of the bugs they had previously in the code without code reviews. But in the last years, we also got like a lot of improvement regarding automated tests. So those also catch bugs. So if you go to your manager and tell them, we want to do code reviews to reduce our bugs by 30%, we want to do automatic testing to reduce our bugs by 30%, those two won't add up, because the automated testing we do now can already catch many of the bugs you could also find by code reviews. But still, that doesn't mean that you should do code reviews to get rid of testing, or that you should automate testing to get rid of the need of code reviews. Because what about the code that has no tests? Should you catch that by code reviews? Well, you can catch that one also by automation, for example, by measuring code coverage. But what about the test cases you haven't written because you haven't thought about, and where you haven't written the code that should be tested that you haven't thought about? That's what no automatic tool can find you. So this is one of the points where code reviewer can say, well, there is a use case, an edge case you haven't thought about. You should write the test and the code to cover this edge case. What about performance and efficiency? I think we've heard it from Kate yesterday, and we can't hear it enough. You can't catch performance by just looking at the code. You have to profile, it's again automation, profile the code, see where the bottlenecks are, and profile again to see if you have solved the bottlenecks. So performance is not really something you can do by just looking at the code, but efficiency, things like picking the right algorithms, like not doing O(n) squared with really large data sets if you can do O(n) log n or something like that. This is all, again, something that you can't automate too good. You can like measure how the performance or the runtimes develop if you do larger data sets, but you can't see if there is a better algorithm, and you can't see what the better algorithm would be. So this, again, is a point where code reviews can be done to find these kind of things. What about code quality? What is code quality? We have the things like maintainability, readability. This is also something that can be automated partially, but not completely. Very much of this is like very subjective. So you have to have humans looking at the code and telling you where there are the code smells, where you have bad names, could use better namings, and the like. So this is also one of the points where code reviews really shine, and which you can't automate. Something that really is not about the whole QA stuff is learning. I mean, if you have, like, one of the developers in your team has written a new feature, and no one else has seen it yet, by doing a code review, the one who does see the code for the first time learns about not only what has been implemented, the business logic that has been implemented, the business domain, but maybe also about some technical stuff. If the developer has used like language features in a way you haven't seen before, you can learn from that. But also the other way around, if I write some code, maybe I know the technical details very, very well, but not so much the domain details, and someone who knows the domain better than me reviews the code, they can tell me something about the domain I didn't know before. So with doing code reviews, the learning goes both ways. And well, as I said before, if you have like new code, having the time to do the code review and reviewing it now and getting now the first looks into the code is a way better way to get familiar with the code than later when there is a bug and you have to fix it quickly. When you have code reviews, you have less pressure, less time pressure to just get familiar with the code and not just, I have to find this one point where the bug is and then fix it and then never look at the code again. And this is also the point when I've written some code. It's basically more or less my property because I'm the only one who knows the code, the only one who has ever seen the code. At that point where someone else has had a look at the code and has said this code is okay, that's the point where the code being my property changes into the code being team property, which is what we should always have. We always talk about like all the code we have in the team should be team property, should not be one specific person's property. I know we have some, in many companies we still see that these two people own the database code, these two people own the business code, these three people own the UI code. But that's not a good thing to have, because if you have like a bug that goes through several layers, you have to coordinate between different people. Or if one of the persons from the database team is on vacations, the other one is getting sick, you have no one knowing the database code anymore. So having this team property of the code, so everyone has at least looked 1 or 2 times at the code, is a really good thing. And that way, doing the code reviews, not only that the 2 database people review each other's code, but also I review the code by another part of the team, can be a good thing to get at least a bit familiar with that code. So when we have code, when we have different kinds of commits, what parts of the new code, of the changed code, should we review? There are people that say, well, you should review every single piece of code. Sometimes you have, well, especially in regulated environments, you have no other choice but to review every single piece of code and document it. And there are others who say, well, if I only go ahead and fix a typo, who wants to waste their time and review that piece of code? And especially if I fix a typo in one function that gets called like all over the place, and I have 400 different files that have been changed, and in every file there's just 1 or 2 lines fixing the typo. That's not really interesting. That's pretty boring. So we shouldn't waste too much time on that. New features. Well, of course, the new features is basically where the new code comes in, where there can be the most errors, where naming is important, where we have new names, new domain concepts maybe, new technical stuff. So these are the things that should always be reviewed. How about bug fixes? Depends. If it's a stupid off by one error, you could say, well, that's one code line changed, +1 or -1. That's not so interesting. So you might want to skip these. But also, if it's only one line of code, the code review can be really quick. So it doesn't hurt to like start the pull request, and your neighbor just says, "Yeah, looks good," and like 30 seconds, and you're done with the code review for that one. If you have bigger bugs, there still can be something to be learned about the error that has been made, and maybe can trigger some thinking about how can we get rid of these kinds of errors in the future. So not being the only one who knows about this kind of error and the reasons for this error can be a good point to do a code review, so you have someone to talk about how can we get rid of these kind of error categories. What about tests? Well, like I just said before, if you have tests but not enough tests because the tests don't cover the edge cases, sure, you should review your tests to see if everything that is in the spec is represented in the tests. Who has seen Kevin Henney's talk yesterday? A few. If you haven't, you should watch it online later, or there is a talk of him just about good unit tests where he talks about how the tests should be named and so on. And in this kind of test, you can really see very good how much of the spec has been translated into tests, and then you can like compare the two and see where the tests are missing. So reviewing tests also is a good thing. Refactoring. If I do not change the functionality at all, I just reorder my code a bit, maybe extract some classes, some functions, rename something. New functionality might be not so interesting, right? But we want to do the refactorings to get more maintainability, to improve the understandability of our code. So having someone look at this, at refactorings, is the first proof that what you did actually did improve the understandability and the readability of your code. It's always one of the main points of code reviews is that you have someone looking, some fresh eyes looking at your code, because if I've written like 2 weeks on the same piece of code, I know the code by heart, but I can't judge if everything else can read the code at all. What about indentations and braces? I run Clang format over the whole code base and I send it to someone to code review it. Great. Nope. This is the kind of things we can automate. We can automate the formatting, and we can automate the checking that the format is correct. We should send no one a piece of code just to look at the white spaces. This really is a waste of time. Never do this. Automate what you can automate and only review those things that you can't automate. Documentation. Who writes documentation anyway? Who reads documentation? Okay. So if we document the code, especially if we write technical documentation how to use our code, we know how the code works, right? And we can just like write 2 sentences, it's obvious how the code works because we know it. So no one needs to review that. Well, someone has to review if the documentation is as clear as the code is, if the documentation covers everything we have done in our code. So documentation really is a good thing to review too. And especially if we just change a bit of documentation, we don't want to read the whole document again. So please do not check in Word documents or something like that. Check in clear text document and generate the Word or PDF or whatever from the clear text. So someone can have a look at the diff and see, okay, these 3 lines have changed. Yeah, there are like tools to diff PDFs and Word and the like, but not every version control system has those included, and it's really easier to have text sources and generate the documentation if you need to generate something more than plain text from it. Also, if I check out the documentation, I can just look at the text. If it's markdown or something, I can just look at the markdown and read it. I don't want to have it in pretty format or something like that. So, but how do we do these code reviews? Do we formalize them, or do we just do them ad hoc? That's pretty much a team decision. There's no single good answer for it. This really is the part where you have to go and try something, and then reflect and adapt. Try it some more time, and then say, well, this doesn't work too well, this is too much, and adapt for your team's needs. These needs can be very different, so there is no single answer. The most important thing, though, is to have a commitment in the whole team to do this. Obviously, the managers have to have the commitment to do code reviews, because it's kind of hard to do code reviews when you have deadlines approaching and the manager is standing behind you grumpy. What are you doing? You have to be coding right now, not looking at other people's code. So this is really important, but it's also important to have the whole team on board to do these kind of things. Because if you have like people who say, well, yeah, we have formalized, we have to do these code reviews, and I now have to review this code. I have been in the situations where some people on the team were like, well, I can't just push everything through, so I have to look at the code, find something, oh, there's a bad name, put a comment, there's a bad name, I don't have to look at the rest, and I'm done with the code review. This won't work. This is just a waste of time. So you really have to agree upon how code reviews should be done, what amount of code reviews should be done, and then have the people do it the way they have agreed on. And also formalizing and does not help if the people don't really believe in what they do. So before I open my pull requests, I should make sure that the code I'm going to submit to code review is as close to done as it could be. It's not really done because it's not reviewed yet, but I should definitely check that it compiles. Then the tests are green. Maybe I should merge like my development branch into the feature branch before I open the merge request, because hey, if we have good tool support, like we can, like on a CI, simulate the merge, and the CI can tell us, well, there would be a merge conflict if you do this right now, so we basically have to work a bit more. CI can also tell us if the longer running tests, like integration tests, complete system tests, still are green, because I don't want to run the system tests like 4 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours on my machine. I want to have the unit tests, and I should have like the I should have like think that this is enough, this will integrate well, and then let the CI do the rest. But I should not open a pull request without knowing or without being confident that this is good and this will compile and this will work. Because there's no much waste of time than shipping the pull request back and forth. It doesn't compile. Okay, no, the tests are not read. Okay, I have to fix some more. Check this before, have a checklist, what to do. There are even features in some version control systems where you have like a pull request template where you can like check, I have done this, I have done this, I have done this, I have done this, which reminds you of everything you should test before you submit a pull request. And so the one who has to review your code doesn't have that much work with it, because after all, time is money. We should definitely not submit giant pull requests. The worst thing that I can imagine is like going on a vacation for 2 weeks, coming back and having a pull request of something one person did in 2 weeks. And then I start to review it, and then I get emails, well, they have pushed another commit, and another commit, and another commit, and I have to review the files all over again. Sure, we can't merge our stuff back into develop before it has been reviewed. But what we can do is like have one feature branch, open a pull request on that feature branch, and if you really have to work on the feature some more, open a new branch on that feature branch. So they have several pull requests to pull the stuff we have done in the 2 weeks, the stuff from day 1, the stuff from day 2, the stuff from day 3, which is far better to review because you have digestible pieces and bits that you can review in an amount of time and then are done with it. This also goes for different kinds of things. I don't want to see feature branches or pull requests where 200 files have been changed because someone discovered Clang format. The next 300 files have been changed because someone has only renamed a function that had nothing to do with the Clang format before. Then here is a bug fix, and here's this new feature, and everything mumbled into one big pull request. If we do review different things, like just a small bug fix, or a feature, or something else, we want to pay different attention to different parts of this. So it's always good to have one pull request for the bug fix, one pull request for the feature, so that we know what we are dealing with and we know how we have to approach this kind of review. We should definitely provide some context. That includes commit messages that contain more than one word. That also includes pull request messages that contain more than only the commit messages. If I have like this single fix or this small refactoring where I just rename one function or only add a parameter or remove a parameter and it affects my whole code base, usually the only thing I have to look at is the function definition and function declaration, not all the call sites, because those changes will look all the same all over the code. So say the interesting stuff you want to look at are these 3 files. Don't bother with the other 200. Or if it's a bug, well, describe or at least provide a link to the bug ticket so they don't have to search it for themselves. This kind of stuff. Provide the context they need to concentrate on the merge request, to concentrate on the code without having to figure out first what actually has happened here. We should do the reviews as soon as possible after the merge request has been opened. Why? Because if you have questions or remarks or something has to be fixed, it's better we get to the developers soon and they still know what they have been doing instead of 2 weeks later when they have to work back into their code themselves. How long the span should be, it depends on the team. It could be like, I want to have a review started like 5 minutes after submitting the pull request. This is rather quick. We could say, okay, 1 day later is okay. But if as a reviewer, you don't have the time to do it right now and you don't see that you have the time in the next days, talk to the reviewee so they know that you don't have time. They maybe find someone else to review the code. Or you can say, well, it's just a minor fix. You can review it later. We can merge it right now if it's just a typo or something like that. But talk to them and don't let them wait for a reaction. After all, they have just written a piece of code and they want some reaction. They want to get the feedback. And just waiting for it a few days is not the right thing. Take enough time for the review, but not too much, of course, because time is money after all. But also don't do it in a hurry, like, okay, I have to go in 5 minutes, I can do this real quick. Skim the code, yeah, looks good, ship it. Of course, it depends on the kind of pull request you have. This is also why it's important to have like these, like providing the context. If you write in the merge request, this is just a one-line bug fix, I can do that in 5 minutes. If it's just a giant feature, I can probably not do that in 5 minutes. Also, if you have like your local guru having submitted a piece of code, don't assume that that reviewing their code needs less time than reviewing the code of your junior programmer. Because first of all, even a guru does commit errors, and they want feedback too. And even if they are so much senior and you are the junior, you still might know something they don't know. They might want to learn from you. But also the other way around, if you have a junior and you are a senior, don't nitpick too much. Start the review alone. Like I said before, what we want to have is a pair of fresh eyes on the code that don't know how the code works yet, who really have like this first look at the code. If you do the review together with the person who has written the code, they might become impatient because you have to take your time to understand the code, and they will start to explain. And poof, this fresh view is gone because you have their view now. So really start the review alone, take your time, look around in the code until you are ready to talk to them. If you need explanations, you can get the review to get these explanations later. Take notes, what you want to do to have explained, but really go through the whole thing alone for one time. Don't touch the code, only looking. Yeah, your pull request was okay, I fixed something there, I fixed something there. If you fix the tiny errors, even if it's done so fast, they won't learn from it. If you just tell them, it's not that much of a time investment to just tell them, you have a typo here, I would think there's a better name here, you could just do technically a bit different here, use the range-based for there, tell them, they learn from it, instead of you having to fix the thing over and over again in the next reviews. Maybe what you want to fix isn't a fix at all. Maybe they did something on purpose the way they did it. And then just telling them, well, I fixed it, and you made it worse, then that one is on you, not on them. So especially when I have a bigger feature, how do I approach it? I approach it like a black box. I start with the tests, with the test names. We had the talk from Kevin yesterday. Look if the test names tell me what the feature should do. Then look into the tests. Do the test actually test what the test name tells me? Looking into the test implementation also gives you a first impression of how the new classes and new functions are used. Because that's what you are going to do mostly with the new classes and functions. Use them, not implement them again. So having this outside-in view doesn't spoil you for later. After you have seen the tests, have a look at the class interface. See if there's something that maybe it's public in the interface, but you haven't seen it in the tests. That's a good hint that it might not be tested at all. And after you've seen the interface, look at the class implementation. Are there any surprises? Is the implementation okay? Are there any edge cases that you find in the implementation are not tested or something like that? So what should I look for when I'm reviewing the code? I definitely should look for possible bugs like these off by one errors. Maybe they are not tested. But if it's a complicated algorithm, well, I have to see how much I really dig into it and how much I try to compile the code in my head. Because after all, we still have the tests that should cover most of it. But as I said earlier, the algorithmic complexity is definitely something I should think about. I should see code smells, naming, and all the stuff. Not brace styles, not tabs versus spaces and indentation. That's what tools are for. And definitely, if they have used Clang format or something in a different way than I would have done, don't start a discussion about how we do indentation. Don't start a discussion about if you use this feature or the other feature. If you think this is worth discussing, there are probably not only you two on the team who want to discuss it. If you think you have a disagreement on which feature we use, if there are alternative features that could both be used, take this to the next team meeting and discuss it then. Take notes. But this is really only about the implementation you have right there and not about principal things. Of course, also, what you have to check for is like things like documentation. Are the comments there? I need to understand the code, especially if I have questions about the code that I want to discuss with the reviewee. This usually means there's something that should be done so the next guy who looks at the code doesn't have these questions. Either use comments, use better names, you name it. On your first walkthrough, take notes, of course, because you want to know what you want to talk about with the reviewee later, and order these notes about priority. You don't want to spend like 2 hours with the reviewee talking about his submission. So it's best to address the most important things first, of course. If you have like, this is an off by one error, here you're missing division by 0, this is more important than, yeah, we could maybe use a better name in this area. So really prioritize and then see how much time you have to discuss the things and how far you want to go through your notes. Remember that this kind of thing can be a very personal thing. Depends on the one who has implemented the code. But if someone has like spent a week or 2 on a new feature, you definitely don't want to put them off. They probably are a bit proud of what they have produced. After all, it's like a bit of a creative process they've done. You don't want to be too blunt with them. So keep in mind it's a personal thing. And be friendly. Okay, this is the wrong emoji still, but hey, talk to the people. This is not talking to the people, talk to the people. You don't want to just flood the commits, the merge request with additional comments. You should do this, you should do that, you should do that. First of all, written communication is flawed, so it's better to really talk to them. The best is just to sit together with them, go over the stuff you have found over your list. The other thing is you should, in the end, take notes in the pull request. What actions you want them to do, what you agreed on, what has to be fixed. But you don't want to write for everyone to see this part is wrong, this part is wrong, that part is wrong. After all, they're still a little bit proud of their code. As I said, don't be too blunt. Review the code, not the committer. This can be important, especially if you're a senior dealing with a junior. it's a junior, you do so many errors. No, stay on the code, not on the one who's written it. Often it's a good kind of thing to do to ask questions instead of just asserting this is wrong. First of all, if you say you have an error here, they go into defense mode. If you ask them, well, I can't find the check for the division by 0 here. Is that right? You give them the opportunity to find it, to actually agree that this is an error, instead of just being served, yeah, you did an error, fix that. And also, if they did the check for division by 0, then just asking, you are not the dumb one who has just, yeah, you didn't check the by 0, yeah, the check is over here. Oh, sorry, this is less awkward to just have asked, I can't find it, well, here it is, okay, thank you. So, in the end, we have to decide whether we accept or reject the pull request. We could do that, and we should do this together with the one who has implemented the stuff, because after we have talked to them over our bullet points, we have found, taking notes, going over the code, we have to agree with them, is this something we should accept or should we reject this one? Should we do some more work on it? If there are obvious bugs, something missing, of course this is a reject, they can fix it, go back later. But if these are rather, well, a bit of naming, maybe a bit of indentation, oh no, not indentation, but a bit of naming, and the really small things that are not that important, you can decide with them together, is this important enough, do you want to fix it now, should we take a note, fix it later, or is it not as important at all, we can just merge it now. Decide with them together. In my last project, I was in a Java and JavaScript web development project as a C++ programmer. I learned JavaScript on the project, and I did quite an amount of JavaScript code and submitted it and to someone who knew JavaScript and who knew the system, and I only got, yeah, it looks good to me. I learned this LGTM. Who does not know it? Yeah, I didn't know it before. I looked it up, means looks good to me. Great, I've learned something. No, nothing. And I was pretty sure that the code I did submit didn't look too good. I tried to submit good JavaScript, but I didn't know JavaScript so well. So I was pretty sure there should have been something to improve it. So if you do this too often, the people you review start to think you are not reviewing the code at all. They start to lose faith, and well, you shouldn't do this. Even if the code is brilliant, if everything is okay, it's better to write them, hey, this code is brilliant, than okay. They want to have the feedback, even if it's good code. On the other hand, well, if you have only this off by 1 error fixed in 1 line of your code, well, there's not much to talk about. Looks good to me, it's okay then. But if you have like 40 new files and a dozen new classes, looks good to me, definitely doesn't cut it. So who do we want to do the code review? Well, we can have 1 person doing the code review, 2 persons. That depends on what you think is appropriate. Senior or junior. Senior could be they know more about the business domain. If it's a new feature that really needs some input about the business domain, then it's probably good to have someone who knows about the business domain review it. If you don't know the language too well, then it's probably good to have someone who is more experienced in the language review it. That could be already 2 persons. But also, if you are the senior who has written the code, still having a junior look at it is a good thing. They learn about new things, how you program. They learn about the business domain. And maybe they can tell you about Mutable. If you're just interested in something someone else has done, but you were not the official reviewer, you just learned this morning in the daily stand-up, I've submitted this new feature, this new part of the library or something. Go ahead, take a look at it. Usually no one forbids you from looking at code that interests you, especially if it's code that you have to look at later anyways. Do it now, when you have time. Of course, don't do it just because you want to find someone else committing errors and send them, hey, you did the error here and you did the error there. You are not the official reviewer. If there's a big error in it, well, you should tell them, because maybe the reviewer, the official reviewer, hasn't seen it either. But don't give the impression that you are controlling what everyone else is doing. But if it's just for interest, just for having a look at it, maybe seeing, well, we are doing vastly different code styles here, this is someone we should discuss in the team, definitely do this. Sometimes if you have submitted really important stuff or something that is technically very interesting, there could be a good time to have like team sessions where you'll do like a 20-minute, 30-minute presentation to the team. We did this new feature. Either this is the new business logic we have in it, or this is the architecture we invented, or this is the new style we did, or this is the new library we submitted. After the on-person review, this can always be a good thing to do if there's something really that should be interesting for the whole team. So definitely do this. Try different approaches. Try to say, okay, we have to review everything at first, and then later maybe, okay, these small kinds of stuff isn't worth the time. Inspect, adapt, do your sprint meetings and decide, should we do something about the code review, should we leave it as it is. As I said, there's no one way to do it, so try different approaches. So that's it from me. Are there any questions, comments? Thank you. The microphone? Is not on? Nope.
Got it. There we go. Brilliant. Hi, my name is Volker. I'm from ThinkStar Software, and I could very well relate to your talk. Very much. Thank you very much for it.
Thank you.
Some well-known ideas, some new hints maybe how we could improve our review process. We do a lot of code reviews, and while I was listening to your talk, I was looking for arguments pro or con doing the review together with the reviewee in kind of a pair programming situation and doing it kind of offline. So you explicitly said look at the code alone by yourself, but then you had quite a few arguments that would actually argue in favor of doing it together. And I'll spoiler it here, so in principle, we always do code reviews together.
Okay.
That's the main reason why we try to locate all the people in one office. Not, well, everybody has their own offices, but on the same floor. So it's easy to talk to people and easy to just walk over and sit next to the code together. And the main argument why you said look at the code alone was that you suggest that the one who is reviewed should not interrupt your thinking. You should have the time to understand what they did on your own and then ask questions from your perspective without taking their perspective first. That's what I understand from your talk.
Yes, this kind of having the fresh eyes on the code. So you are basically in the situation which everyone else will be in looking at the code the first time.
Right, right. I understand that. But I think there is a competence, something you should know and you should be able to do for the reviewer as well as for the reviewee. So it's the reviewee's job not to interrupt your thinking. If he wants the review, then if someone comes to me and wants a review from me, I sit down, and if they start talking, first thing I tell them is shut up. It's easy as that, and people understand it. It happens once, twice, because some people are very eager to talk about all their thoughts. And then if they want to talk, there's only one question I ask, which is, what problem did you solve? Which is basically what you said, the comment should give a hint to the bug in the bug base, or there should be comments. So by sitting down together, many of these formalities are captured very easily. They require a bit of discipline from both sides, from both parties. It thinks that it works well. Everybody learns about this. And yeah, just, sorry, I stop ranting here. Just asking, maybe you can say one or two more sentences about peer reviews together, like as opposed to offline reviews.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, documenting what you have done in this feature branch for this pull request, and definitely in the several commits you have made, should be done regardless of whether you do a pull request in a review or not. Because if you later want to see what has been done in the code, you want to see the commit messages and so on. So you don't get around this one by having someone sitting, the implementer sitting beside you. And apart from that, if I take like half an hour maybe or an hour to review what the implementer has done in the last 2 weeks, and there's only one single question or two questions or 2 points or a handful of points we can discuss in 5 minutes, then it's just a waste of time of having the person sitting beside me shutting up for an hour doing nothing, instead of just doing the work together, the pairing for 5 minutes after I've reviewed the code.
Makes sense. Thank you.
When I worked on a small team, I used to watch every code review that was sent to the code base to own the entire code base. But since then, our team has grown twice, and now it's quite difficult to do all the reviews because you spend all your time doing review. And maybe you have some kind of advice how to organize the review process when there are quite a few people in the team and everybody sends new reviews.
I think you should definitely argue about whether it's a wise decision that the one who implements the code determines who is the one who reviews the code. I've told you about the situation I was in where people tended to just find the first error and then send it back because they didn't want to do the code reviews at all. In that situation, when one of the people who did want to do the code reviews did submit they would submit their code to someone who actually did review the code. But those who who weren't invested in the code review, who had no interest in doing code reviews, they wouldn't send their parts to the one who did really review the code, because they would get feedback. They would get a lot of feedback, but they wanted to just go on and do the next task. So we would have like 2 groups, more or less, in the team. one group doing code reviews and the other group doing just these fake code reviews where they would find the first name. So you could just go ahead and do something like round robin, or defining before you actually implement the feature who will do the code review. But you definitely should see that that the reviewing is spread evenly and not one person is doing the review for everyone. This is also something you have to figure out in the team, what works, what doesn't work, and yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Nice talk. Thank you very much, Arne.
Thank you.
So what would be your suggestion for the Boy Scout rule? Because you have talked about features, documentations, refactors, but what happens if someone is fixing a bug or doing a feature that will be 10 lines in a couple of files?
Yes.
If he applies the Boy Scout rule, he will rename a variable, a function, so you will end with like 3 times bigger pull request and code review touching 5 files. So the reviewer loses focus and they don't want to do that. And if they don't do that, they won't make a different code review. I mean, if they leave the camp, they won't go back to the camp to clean it. So, and if they do that, it will conflict with their own pull request, so they never do that again. So what would be your suggestion to deal with this?
Yes, the Boy Scout rule is about tidying up your code a bit, not too much. Because if as a Boy Scout you spend one night at the campsite, you start to do a 3-week cleanup of the campsite after it's out of proportion, right? So if you have a bigger feature where you do some refactoring, you could go ahead and do the refactoring, the cleanup, at least in a different commit, and mark this commit. Maybe even open a different branch and merge them in the end, and have 2 pull requests. If you have the single commit, depends on the version control system. If you can just say, just review these commits, these are the feature commits. This one is the cleanup commit, the Boy Scout commit. So they can just do this in 2 parts.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk.
Thanks.
This is really a suggestion rather than a question. When I'm doing code reviews and I'm tempted to think, oh, looks good to me, fine. I say this, I say to the reviewee, oh, yeah, this pattern here, this is very effective, I like this. Or your choice here, yeah, I couldn't have done that better myself. So I try to turn this into a positive experience as well, not just a critical one.
Yes.
Which means, too, that if you're reviewing a lot of good code, it's not that you spend 2 hours with this guy and at the end you say, yeah, there's a name change there. It's an experience all the way through. You say, he says, oh, I did this, and you say, yeah, that's great. I think that's great too. And you both learn from this and you both come out with a positive experience, not just a critical one of what was wrong with it.
You definitely should give this feedback personally.
Yeah.
You could also, but the looks good to me was about just saying looks good to me and just merging the thing without ever talking to the person.
Yeah.
So sitting with them together, and if it's only just over coffee saying, well, I merged your pull request, it was just brilliant, it was really good.
And picking out specific things, not just, yeah, that was good, but you say, yeah, this pattern here, that's actually better than I would have done it, or yeah, I really like what you did here, I'm going to try doing that next time, that kind of thing.
That could also be worth taking notes about that and talking with them. Should this be something we should present to the team, for example?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.